Welcome to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church.
Of missional engagement for the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. And I'm your host today, and part of my role as Director of Missional Engagement includes the Creation Care Ministry team and the coordination with the Creation Care Ministry team. And today we're here with a couple of guests that we're going to talk about the upcoming season of creation, which happens this fall. We're going to give you some information about it, what it is. We're going to talk about maybe some upcoming events that are going to be occurring, and we're also going to be talking about and sharing some ways that this can be celebrated in your local churches and congregations. So joining me today is Reverend Johnathan Brake, Global Ministries Environmental Sustainability Program Manager, and also Reverend Jarrod Davis, the new Creation Ministries Coordinator, which is a role that is shared between the North Carolina Conference and the Western North Carolina Conference. And we'll share a little bit more about what that is as well. But so before we get into the season of creation, Jarrod, can you share a little bit about this newly created position of our conferences?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I'm very happy to be here this morning. Really, the reason I'm here is honestly because I really love a tomato sandwich in the summertime. I grew up in Eastern North Carolina in rural communities my whole life. We've got a family farm. I grew up working on farms, grew up gardening, that sort of thing. And after I entered the ministry, while I was at Duke and was pastoring a church in Person County, I was in a Christian ethics class. And in this class, we had to sign up to give little reports on individual topics. And by the time the sign-up sheet got around to me, my choices were limited to either environmental ethics or sexual ethics. So I chose environmental ethics, seemed the more comfortable thing to talk about. And I have to admit that at that time, I was a little bit of a skeptic when it came to climate change. I kind of associated environmentalists with hippies who really don't know what it's like out there. You know, like I said, I grew up on farms. I grew up working with animals. I grew up working with crops. I grew up, wandering the fields and forests around my house and around the farm. So I considered myself much more of an expert on the outside than a lot of these people. And so I went into that project really not wanting to do it, really with really low expectations. And I got to the class where the guest lecturer would be presenting on environmental ethics. And it was a man named Dr. Norman Wurzba. And he got up there and he started talking about tomatoes and how delicious tomatoes are. And I thought, well, yeah, you're right. Like that they are really delicious. I love a tomato sandwich. You talk about how good bruschetta is. And as I sat and listened to him, I thought, he's not talking about the environment. He's talking about what I'm doing in my backyard. Like I've literally got a garden in my backyard where I'm growing tomatoes exactly like he's talking about. And so that introduction to Dr. Wurzba and his works really got me started on looking at what does it mean from a Christian standpoint, from a theological standpoint. What does it mean to actually be in relationship with the earth? And I mean that very literally, in relationship with the ground, with the plants that are coming out of the ground, with the animals that are living in our forests, in our streams, and the animals that are living in our pastures. And so that is really what got me started down this road. I had a passion for garden ministry and started a community garden at the church that I served right after graduating from Duke. That really took off and was a booming ministry. And I wanted other churches to have that opportunity. And so I started presenting to other churches and presenting at annual conference. And it just happened to be that year was the year that we kicked off in the North Carolina Conference, the Creation Care Committee, which was originally led by the Reverend Pat Watkins, who was the first United Methodist missionary to creation. And he had retired from that role and moved to North Carolina, ended up living just 15 minutes down the road from me. So I became good friends with Pat. I got involved with the Creation Care Committee, got involved eventually in chairing that committee. And as I furthered this work, realized like, this is what I really feel called to do. I want to work in a ministry that sees our responsibility of creation and takes it seriously, not just from a scientific point of view, but really from a practical theological point of view. And began looking for that opportunity. Was doing a little bit of work with Johnathan, and he said, "Hey, you got to meet this guy, Brian." And that relationship is really what led to this new position of Creation Ministries coordinator.
Great, Jarrod. Thank you for that. And can you share a little bit of maybe your availability and how you hope to work specifically with the Western North Carolina Conference, but also the integration with what's been happening already in the North Carolina Conference?
Yeah, so my job title is Creation Ministries coordinator, and I put a lot of emphasis on that last word, coordinator. I'm not the director. I'm not the guy in charge. I'm not the guy making things happen. I'm the guy that supports the work of the local church in Creation Ministries. I have 3 areas that I'm trying to focus in right now. That's education, advocacy, and missions. And so the education, I speak every opportunity I get. I go to local churches. I speak in districts. I host events, training events, webinars, that sort of thing. The advocacy, we've been doing a lot of work. I'm very fortunate to have a partner in this advocacy work who has been organizing advocacy efforts around the Farm Bill, because we just happen to have 3 congresspeople from North Carolina who are on the Farm Bill committee. And so we have an opportunity to speak to them. And to do that work, it takes all of us across the entire state coming together. And we're looking at some other advocacy opportunities, both on local, on state, and on federal levels. And hopefully we can do that. And that ties into education as well, because a lot of us don't know how to be an advocate. And so we need to learn. That's one thing that I've benefited from in this partnership, is learning how to be an advocate. And then mission work. This is really the impetus that started this position. Looking at how we do mission work, and especially when it comes to disaster response. And I know we're going to say more about this in a little while, but we want to recognize that disaster is not just when a storm comes, but we're living in a disastrous time right now. We are facing just the beginnings of the ill effects of climate change. And so recognizing, hey, this is a disaster. So how do we respond to this proactively? How do we mitigate disaster, and how do we better equip communities to withstand these stronger and more frequent disasters? So I would love an opportunity to speak to anybody that'll have me to come and speak and to share with this work.
Yeah, and I know you're available to visit districts and to preach on Sunday mornings as well. And I think that's a great segue into our conversation about the season of creation. Johnathan, can you tell us what is this season of creation? And we can share a little bit about how our listeners might be able to get involved.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. The season of creation is several years old now. My understanding is it developed primarily in Australia during their springtime, which is fall here in the northern hemisphere. And so the season of creation has spread around the world to various denominations, and the United Methodist Church adopted it several years ago as one of our official seasons. Technically, it begins on September 1st with the Day of Prayer for All Creation. And that's an international prayer day, sort of like we're accustomed to the Day of Prayer for the United States or something like that. September 1st is a day of prayer for all creation. And that launches the season of creation, which concludes on October 4th which has been for centuries the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi, who you probably know as a patron saint of ecology. And he's beloved by all kinds of different Christian denominations. And so this season of creation gives us more than just one day in the spring around Earth Day, which was often a time when we Methodists would celebrate. This gives us 34 days, including 5 or maybe 6 Sundays, depending on how the calendar falls, to have a stronger focus at a time of the year when, if you're a pastor, like I've been a pastor for 23 years now, you're trying to figure out what to do with ordinary time during all of these months. And the season of creation really gives us a fresh opportunity to do something in our churches and bring a new attention to an area that, theologically speaking, we have for too long neglected and left out of much of our teaching and learning. And so if our listeners want to get a pen and paper, I'm going to name some of the resources that I've used through the years as a pastor. These are ways to celebrate the season because so few churches have really paid much attention to the creation beyond the human reality and what impacts and affects us. But this season of creation can give us something fresh that in a lot of our churches, we're wondering, what have we not already covered again and again in different seasons? This season is brand new and fresh for us. So you might first think, if you're a pastor or you're a layperson thinking, where do I get this information? Where does this season happen? You would think worship and sermons. And so sermons are a great place to start. If you, as a pastor or someone asking your pastor to give a sermon on creation care, creation justice, or something just in celebrating what God has created and designed and made available for us, then it can be done in one sermon if the pastor is not comfortable with the whole series, or you could cover the whole season. I've done both. In some places, I've preached 1 or 2 sermons. In other places, I have preached an entire series during the season. And you can find some great resources for planning worship and sermons as well in the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement website. You can find them at umcreationjustice.org. They have a brand new resource this year that was just developed for this year's season of creation, but there are other resources from prior years. And then if you're familiar, pastors, you may be familiar with the United Methodist Discipleship Worship Planning website. And they don't update the season of creation every year, but they do have some great resources there. You can also look to the website called seasonofcreation.org. Seasonofcreation.org has many, many years of resources from a lot of different Christian faith traditions. And so you can pick and pull from many of those. I've preached a series before and tied it to a small group study during the season of creation, or I have preached a sermon like at the end of August, setting up a series of studies that we'll be doing during the season of creation. And so some of those that I have used, you may find interesting, but there are many others than what I'll mention here. But if you want to write this down, there's a book that's a few years old now, but it's called A Hopeful Earth. A Hopeful Earth, Faith, Science, and the Message of Jesus. This is a book by Bishop Sally Dick. Her last name is D-Y-C-K, and her niece Sarah Ehrman, E-H-R-M-A-N. They really do a great job of presenting the material and challenging us to action through a Wesleyan Methodist way of thinking. So if you want something that's going to use the terminology, the way of processing and developing our sense of well-being as Methodist people, then A Hopeful Earth is a great resource for that. Another resource that I've used is called Organic Wesley. Organic Wesley, a Christian perspective on food, farming, and faith. This is by William Bill Garant Jr., and he's a Methodist farmer in Virginia. And this is a study that comes with a video resource as well. And so it's designed for Sunday school or small group studies and really ties us back into that whole sense of food, farming, and faith. It's called Organic Wesley. A third resource that I've used is called Stewards of Eden. Stewards of Eden, what Scripture says about the environment and why it matters. This one comes from Dr. Sandra Richter. She's a Hebrew scholar and also wrote a longer Bible study called Epic of Eden. But Stewards of Eden is designed for small groups or Sunday school study and is a great resource to use during the season. And then finally, I'll share with you A Hospitable Planet is a book that's been out a few years. It's called Hospitable Planet, Faith, Action, and Climate Change. And this one is by Stephen Jarrod, who is a retired engineer married to a Jewish rabbi, and they live in the Raleigh area. The book is written primarily to a Christian audience by looking at the world that Jesus knew to help us interpret the New Testament. But you get a lot of kind of the background of Hebrew understanding and how the view of the land and our care for it is a part of that. But he goes further and puts some practical action items in place or in the book that we can consider and wrestle with and learn how to do that locally and nationally. So that's Hospitable Planet by Stephen Jarrod. Those are just some studies that I've used through the years, and I have found in every single one that the people who come and listen and learn walk away with more of a sense of a love for God's creation and a desire to do something about it. Very much like Jarrod was describing from his class in seminary, is this sense that we need to get active and do something about it. So sermons and study are a couple of ways that churches can celebrate the season of creation. And some other things to look for would be prayers. There are prayers in our book of worship. There are prayers on these websites that I've mentioned. You might insert a prayer that's creation focused in worship every Sunday, even if the sermon itself is not directly related to the season of creation. You can write these in social media posts or put them in your newsletter. You might want to record yourself reading one of these prayers as a weekly or daily devotion during the season of creation and send that out by social media posts. So I can share with you one example here, which is called the Canticle of the Creatures, and this is attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. And it goes like this. Most high, all-powerful, all-good Lord, all praise is yours, all glory, all honor, and all blessings. To you alone, Most High, do they belong, and no mortal lips are worthy to pronounce your name. Praised be you, my Lord, with all your creatures, especially Sir Brother Sun, who is the day through whom you give us light, and he is beautiful and radiant with great splendor of your Most High. He bears the likeness. Praised be you, my Lord, through Sister Moon and the stars. In the heavens you made them bright, precious, and fair. Praised be you, my Lord, through brothers Wind and Air, and fair and stormy all weather's moods, by which you cherish all that you have made. Praised be you, my Lord, through Sister Water, so useful, humble, precious, and pure. Praised be you, my Lord, through Brother Fire, through whom you light the night, and he is beautiful and playful and robust and strong. Praised be you, my Lord, through our sister Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us, producing varied fruits and colored flowers and herbs. Praised be you, my Lord, through those who grant pardon for love of you and bear sickness and trial. Blessed are those who endure in peace. By you, Most High, they will be crowned. Praised be you, my Lord, through Sister Death, from whom no one living can escape. Woe to those who die in mortal sin. Blessed are they she finds doing your will. No second death can do them harm. Praise and bless my Lord, and give him thanks, and serve him with great humility.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Johnathan.
And so prayers like that or other prayers can be used in worship to really draw people back into a different sense of who we are and how we interact with all of God's creation. And they're just little things that we often overlook. But if we carry on week after week, inserting some aspect of caring for God's creation, it begins to have that cumulative effect in our congregation. And so those are some examples. I've got some other things. I may mention those in a moment that we can do as well. But Brian, back to you.
Thank you, Johnathan. Jarrod, one of the things that you've done early on in your new shared position of Creation Ministries coordinator is the workshop for the season of creation. Can you share a little bit about that and maybe how people might get connected to that?
So in July, we had a workshop training people for the season of creation. What we've kind of realized, we've been observing season of creation in the North Carolina conference for the last few years, but it's been very much top led. It's been the conference creation care committee putting on these events. And what we really want is to get the local churches involved, not just involved. We want to get the local churches taking the lead in this. But what we find is when we reach out to the local churches, they say, well, we don't know how. When we reach out to local pastors, they say, well, I don't know how to preach about creation. And a lot of times we hear from lay people saying, well, we want to do this, but how do we get the pastor on board? And so that's what the workshop wanted to focus on, is how do you observe season of creation? We asked folks ahead of time, like, what are the areas that y'all are interested in? They want to talk about missions, they want to talk about advocacy, and they want to talk about Sunday morning as well. One of the things that we realized while we were there listening to folks is there's already a lot going on that might not necessarily be front and center. We heard from a lot of churches that they had various recycling programs that are more than just, we have a recycling bin set up. There was one that they collect styrofoam from all over their community, not just church members, but they've got a big trailer set up, people bringing styrofoam. And then that styrofoam is in turn recycled and turned into, I believe that one was mini houses for the homeless. I think this is what that one was. There was another one that collected plastic wrap, and that was turned into park benches. And so these are ways that you're not just recycling in the same old way, but you're actually reaching out through this recycling program to your community and to what Jesus termed the least of these. And so that was really good to hear from my end, because there are things that I'm not the expert at, right? I didn't know that this was a possibility, and so being able to hear from folks that, hey, this is something we're doing, was great. And then when we got into the Sunday morning stuff, it was a lot of talking about what Johnathan just mentioned. Like there are ways beyond just, okay, the pastor has to do a sermon series. And so we heard from other people, from local churches, this is what we're doing to observe it. Some say, well, we can't get the leadership on board for the entire thing, but we're able to get one Sunday. We're able to get 2 Sundays. We're able to get one Sunday school class, whatever it is. And that's something I want to encourage people with as well. You're not going to save the world overnight. You're not. It's not going to happen. But these little things that you can do at your church, really to change the culture of church, to get the church to realize, like, just as we see working at a soup kitchen or Bible study as just something that we do, so should we see taking care of God's creation as this is what it means to be a Christian, right? We don't just show up and have one sermon every year about this one topic, but this is an active part of our lives as followers of Jesus.
I'm glad that you brought in the hands-on approach that our churches can get involved with, because it is the theological learning and teaching and understanding, and then the practical application in our homes and in our lives and in our churches.
Yeah, and I think I've seen that firsthand when you as a pastor, you speak to a certain subject, you're not sure like how much of it is actually getting through. And I remember several years ago, my church I was serving at that time was hosting a creation care event. Here I'm on the creation care committee. I'm organizing this event. It's been in the bulletin for months by that point. And one of our church members got up and she was reading the announcements on Sunday morning, and she got to the one about this event that was coming up and said, on such and such day, we're having an event to talk about creation care. And she paused and said, whatever that means. And she kept on going. I thought, okay, so clearly, like we're not getting the message across, right? It takes more effort. It takes more time, more than just an announcement on Sunday mornings or an occasional sermon to really get this saturated through the congregation.
So, Jarrod, I know the workshop for the season of creation has already passed, but you did record it, I understand. Can you tell us how we might be able to access those?
Yes, that whole thing was recorded, and then since it was 3 hours long, we chopped it up into much more manageable sections, one around each topic. But we've got those videos on the North Carolina Conference's Vimeo page, and I'll provide the link to that playlist, and y'all can access that. We want this information out there. This is by no means hidden behind some sort of a paywall. Take it, use it.
Great, thank you. Johnathan, do you have anything else you'd like to add to the season of creation conversation?
Sure. A few other things I can think of is, first of all, to keep in mind that the season of creation is a time to give more focus to this topic, but it is a year-round approach to how we live out our faith. And so we want to remember that it's really about reconnecting our people with all that God loves, to instill this love for all of the parts of God's creation beyond just such a focus on the human interaction. I mean, we have made our world if you want to call it a human creation that really separates us from the wider creation of God. And so a lot of times I tell my congregation, get out and take an extra walk. Drive with your windows down. It's September. Things aren't as hot as they were in the summer. Begin to feel and smell and hear nature around you in ways that we typically close the door and shut ourselves away from it. Personally, I love outdoor worship, but I learned that so many people have never worshiped outdoors when the pandemic hit, and we're worshiping on parking lots and under picnic shelters and on ball fields and places like that. People began to notice that the birds would sing along with us. The butterflies would flit above our heads, and the deer would cross by, kind of curious as to what are these humans doing out here in our worship space. And I noticed that after we went back to the buildings, church members would start to say, when do we get to go outside and worship again? There's a connection that some people made. So if your church doesn't offer a place on campus that works for outdoor worship, go to a park or a local camp. Reserve a picnic shelter, eat lunch together after you worship. Spend some time doing something special like that. But in addition to like Sunday morning, other things you may want to do during that season, and you don't have to do all of these, but pick some that might fit, would be a blessing of the animals service. A lot of churches have done that through the years, typically around that feast day of St. Francis, October 4th, but it can be any time during the season. And it's a great way to connect to the community. You can collaborate with other churches and do this as a larger group, advertise through all the vet offices in town, and make it a way that people can connect with your church. I mean, let's face it, people love their pets, right? And so if the church says, hey, we love your pets too, and we want you to bring them and let's bless your pets, then maybe they're going to say, this could be a church that I'd be interested in going to because they care about more than just themselves, as is often the perspective in the community around us. Get out away. Other things you can do is get out away from the church building to plant trees, to do roadside cleanup or waterway cleanups. Take a group and go hike on a trail and have a time of prayer or devotion somewhere along the trail. Your youth group may focus on creation care and justice for the month, or your children's program may have a harvest time celebration. I've been in churches where we've done a church-wide or community-wide special dinner, and we've done things like invite the local water keeper or a high school earth sciences teacher to come and talk to us. What is the interconnectedness of all of life that we often overlook? And serve at those dinners, we would often serve like locally sourced foods, organic food. It's a lot easier to do that in the fall than in the early spring, when I've tried to do that before around Earth Day. But by all means, if you do the meal, don't use plastic and styrofoam, or if you do, it's because you have the recycling that Jarrod mentioned earlier, and you know exactly where those products can go. And then lastly, it's a great time to talk about launching a new initiative for your church, whether it is a new form of recycling or doing some energy efficiencies or planting a pollinator garden for the spring or things like that. It's a great time to say, what are we doing as a congregation? And how can this season of creation help us become better stewards and caretakers of what God has placed into our hands as the children who follow Christ and follow the creator of all that we know?
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that, if I could, and just kind of echo what Brian was saying, what Johnathan was saying about making this a year-round thing, that just this 1 month out of the year is not the only month that creation needs taken care of, but finding creative ways to do it. Worshiping outside, absolutely. We had a group at the church I was serving at the time that enjoyed outside worship so much during COVID that when we went back in, we kept a second service outside for that very reason Johnathan was talking about. We liked hearing the birds sing along with us. I remember I had one guy come up to me after one of those services and said, "Did you hear that quail? I haven't heard a bobwhite quail in years." There's another time I was out there preaching, and a little black rat snake just happened to slither past me. I said, "Well, I guess we're going to become snake handlers all of a sudden." But no, it's a great way to connect with God's creation, but also finding things throughout the year. The mission projects. There's a church that I spoke at this past April that is in Ann Street UMC in Beaufort, North Carolina, and they didn't have a lot of land available, but they had a lot of flower beds around them, and so they had taken all those little flower beds and just planted pollinators. I mean, that is a mission project right there. It's something that we've already got. We're going to put flowers here anyway, so let's make it flowers that are going to be beneficial. Johnathan mentioned picking up waste along the roadside. Yes, absolutely. Going out there and doing whatever. Finding ways to incorporate creation themes into sermons is actually pretty easy. Your sermon doesn't have to be directly focused on creation care, but look at how many times Jesus spoke about creation as a metaphor, as part of his parables. Look at the Psalms. Look at all the different ways that God speaks to creation and find ways to incorporate that. But I'll also add, also another thing, someone reached out to me a while back and said, "Look, we can't do September as season of creation. We've already got stuff planned, but do you think Advent could be?" Yes, absolutely. Advent, because what's Advent about? Advent is about preparing for Christ to come. And how do we prepare? We're already bringing in greenery. We're already talking about the plants are dying down, but they're going to come back to life. And even in popular Christmas songs like Joy to the World, you got that verse in there, "No more let sins or sorrows go, or thorns infest the ground." Why do we mention thorns in a Christmas song? Well, it goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. So look at all these ways that you can do it. It's not that hard. You will face some resistance. You just will. Accept that. That's part of it. I know when we had been worshiping outside for a while, I had a church member reach out to me and say, "Pastor, I'm not coming back to church until we're inside again. I can't worship outside. It's just not natural." I thought to myself, I feel like maybe I missed something. When God planted Eden, maybe I missed the part where God built a church building for Adam and Eve. But look, you're always going to face resistance to this.
I think this would be a good time to to talk a little bit about the resolution that passed at annual conference this year, because we're talking about, starting some new initiatives, looking at the season of creation, some things that you can do in your churches and activities that you can do in your communities. And the Creation Care team brought forth a resolution at annual conference again and passed that resolution. Johnathan, would you like to share a little bit about that and also in response to the passing of that, how our Creation Care team can be a resource for folks?
Sure, Brian. So at annual conference this summer, there was a resolution passed at the Western North Carolina Conference, and the North Carolina Conference has passed a very similarly worded resolution. Basically, what we're saying is we're encouraging every church across the annual conference to develop a Creation Care team. And we're not declaring that you must, but we are encouraging all the churches to to develop a Creation Care team that can begin looking at how do we incorporate some of the ideas that we're talking about on this podcast into the life of the church. And so here in the Western North Carolina Conference, I know that each conference has a little different way of doing this, but we are in the process now of identifying which of our churches have a Creation Care team, which of our churches would like to have one, and which of our churches have maybe not thought about it yet. And then the next steps will be, how can we as the Creation Care ministry of the conference help in local churches through some resourcing, through training, through encouraging some churches to work together with other churches who are already doing some of this. But the goal is not that it has to happen overnight, but little by little, piece by piece, adding a sense of who are we as those who love the creator of all of the universe, and how do we reconnect with the interconnectedness of life itself. So many times the Bible talks about the giver of life. Well, that giver of life was not just human life, and human life would not exist without all the other life forms. And so we want to encourage our churches to begin looking at what does it mean for us to begin to see how we love God's creation and love all of God's neighbors, all of our neighbors, as God's creation as well.
Well, so the North Carolina Conference and the Western North Carolina Conference both passed very similar resolutions at annual conference. And the overall gist of both of them is really shifting our focus to making Creation Care a priority. Again, it cannot be from the top down. It's got to be top down, bottom up, meet in the middle, do everything we can, right? And so trying to identify people on a local level, I think is going to be very beneficial, because so many people that I have met doing this work, especially at these smaller rural churches, which make up a majority of churches in both conferences, most of these people that are in these churches feel like they're the only ones who care. They're the only ones that are making it a priority. And obviously that's not the case. Maybe they feel like they're the only ones. Maybe on rare occasions, maybe they are the only ones within that congregation that care about it. I doubt that, though. I found that a lot of people are walking around concerned about creation, concerned about climate change, concerned about the environment, concerned about their children and their grandchildren and whether they will have a future, but they're not talking about it to each other. And so we want to assure you that you are not alone in this, that we are concerned about it on the conference level, we're concerned about it on the denominational level, we're concerned about it on the district level and on the local church level. And so we want to assist you, to walk with you, to connect you to one another, to like-minded people, to offer you as many resources as we can for developing these local teams, these district teams. If you are in a situation where like, no, I really am literally the only one in my congregation, fine. Let's walk with you on that too. Let's find you a support group, do whatever we can to assist you in making this a priority.
Johnathan, do you want to share anything about the denominational level that could be a resource to folks that are interested in Creation Care?
Sure, yes. So there are a couple of things. I mentioned earlier the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement in reference to worship resources. But the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement is a collaboration of laity trying to help connect and resource United Methodist, trying to understand what's going on at all of the various agencies of the church, because all of them are doing different things. One of the things that I do personally is I work for Global Ministries, and my role is to oversee our Earth Keepers program. We talked about this on an earlier podcast, but our Earth Keepers program is training laity and clergy on a local grassroots level, as Jarrod was saying, kind of that bottom-up approach, organize and get some people together to do something that really addresses a need that is creation-focused or creation care and justice related in your community, whether it's in your local church or beyond. And in addition to that, we offer what we call the Global Ministries Creation Care Network. And this is an online network platform, a little different from social media in that you have to join. There's no cost, but you join, and then you have, right now we have well over 600 people from around the world who are interested in creation care and justice issues. And you'll find people on there who are near you geographically, or they're interested in the same kind of issues and concerns that you are working with. And so it's a great place to kind of cross-fertilize ideas and begin to grow together in our understanding. So those are two great resources. We'll put the notes on how to get in touch with those in our notes for the podcast and help you connect.
Yeah, so Johnathan, you didn't mention Earth Keepers, but that's a pretty big thing that that you are in charge of. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned that, my responsibility is overseeing the Earth Keepers program with Global Ministries. And if you are interested in learning more about Earth Keepers, you can be in touch with me. But in a nutshell, it really is training you to become active in your local community, whereas so often we hear how horrible things are, but we don't know what to do about it. And so in this training, you will learn the biblical and theological reasons for carrying out our faith by caring for creation. You'll learn how different segments of society are impacted differently by ecological, environmental justice issues. And there's a program or a project planning process by which we walk you through. So when you finish the training, you actually have your project ready to go and begin putting that into action in your local setting, whether it's a local church or a neighborhood or the whole community, or even broader than that. Brian Mateer, who's an Earth Keeper, his project is based on kind of an annual conference level approach, and it's spreading beyond that as well. So if you're interested in becoming more actively involved and you would like to have some training and preparation for that, you can go to the website umcmission.org/earthkeepers with an S on the end. umcmission.org/earthkeepers. And you will see that our current training is already put together, will happen in October, but our next training will be in early 2024. And we would love to have more folks from across North Carolina being a part of that training.
Thank you, guys. It's a lot of exciting things going on, and a lot of good information about the season of creation, which is just around the corner. Jarrod, Johnathan, tell the folks how they can reach you and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so I am available. This is my full-time job, is to serve all of y'all in both Western and Eastern North Carolina. So I would love to hear from you. Love to hear how I could help out. Love to come speak. The easiest way to reach out to me is through email, and that is jdavis, JDAVIS, @nccumc.org. And yeah, like I said, love to hear from you. Love any opportunities I can to spread this message.
And this is Johnathan. You can reach me, or let me just say that I work for Global Ministries, but I still live in the Western North Carolina Conference. I'm in Hickory, so it's not too hard for me to get to most parts of our annual conference. And you can reach me at my annual conference address as well, jbrake@wncumc.net. That's jbrake@wncumc.net. at wnccumc.net.
Johnathan and Jarrod, thanks again. Thanks for all that you're doing for God's creation in the areas of creation care and creation justice. And we appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. We hope you enjoy listening to these podcasts and use them as a way to stay connected to our community. Remember to subscribe to Means of Grace for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us an honest rating and a review. It helps others find this podcast. Follow the WNCC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WNCCUMC. Once again, that's at WNCCUMC. Means of Grace is produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.